Do you remember when you first got married? Remember those stars in your eyes and the dreams that you had? You were all set for a lifetime of holding hands and cuddling and romance. You were ready for a fairy tale to begin once upon a time. And you were going to be the prince, and she was going to be the princess. You were all ready for happily ever after. How long did it actually take for reality to set in for you? Was it your mother or hers? Was it the work? Maybe the chores around the house, or was it money? Do you remember the moment whenever you weren't sure what you'd gotten into? When the disillusionment of reality had clouded the romantic ideas that you had from the beginning? I think there comes a point in everyone's marriage where decisions have to be made. Where the stresses of life, where the reality of marriage, where the pressure of children, or the lure of money, there comes a point where reality forces you to decide if being married is really what you want. Where you have to decide, is it really worth it? So you take a good hard look at your life and you make a decision. And for me, that meant looking at Wendy and seeing Wendy. Not seeing all the romantic ideas that I had, not seeing what I thought I wanted, but actually seeing Wendy. You know what I saw? I saw a marriage that was different than I expected. But if I stopped looking at what I wanted, what I thought I wanted to see, and I saw what I had, it was better. Because what I had was an amazing relationship with a great woman who had also become my best friend. And that was far better than all of the Hallmark romances that there are. It's not a greeting card romance. You remember when you first had kids? Remember whenever you had those Disney views of family? Remember those storybook families? I thought I'd be my kid's best friend. I thought we'd always be buddies. And we were for a while. We rode around together. My kids loved to come to the office with me. They all wanted to be my best friend. But something happened along the way. And it always does. It's that moment when you look over and say, "Son, how about going to work and hanging out with Dad today?" And he rolls his eyes and he mutters something about a new video game. And what do you do then? There are times when you look at that little bundle of joy all grown up and you wonder if you handled things right. Times when you wonder, maybe I missed it. Your life, your family, it doesn't look like a storybook, and Disney's not interested in your life. So you start thinking back and remembering all of the joy that you had. You start to remember your dreams, and you remember why it was that you had children in the first place. And you realize that the person you raised, even though he's not who you thought he would be, he's pretty cool in his own right. And maybe you did okay. Maybe if you put aside the dreams of what you thought it might have been and you take a good look at where you are, you might just find that you have something that even Disney couldn't deliver. In Mark 9, Jesus' disciples are a little bit disillusioned. They had dreams of grandeur. They were imagining themselves in the seats of power with Jesus. And Jesus said, "No, that's not the way it's going to happen. I am going to die. And if you want to come with me, then you have to deny yourself, take up a cross, and follow me." Now, that's not exactly what they signed up for. They were following a prominent rabbi. They were thinking they were going to have some status in the world. They were thinking that following Jesus would be a religious rush. They'd be casting out demons and preaching fire and brimstone and debating with the powerful people. They'd be like religious rock stars. And now they're talking about denying themselves and crosses and death. You talk about a bummer. Disillusionment. So Jesus sees this in them. And he takes them up on a mountain, and he reveals himself to them in an amazing way. Because right before them, he's transfigured into light. His clothes glow white. Moses and Elijah appear with him, and a cloud forms over him, and a voice from heaven speaks. "This is my beloved Son. Listen to him." Now, to me, when I read that, it seems a little cool, but a lot foreign to me. But what it is a series of reminders. It's like the wedding ring on my hand, or like a baby book on the shelf. These guys are Jewish, and they are thoroughly versed in Old Testament imagery. So if you have a man who begins to glow, what does that tell you? Well, I remember in the Old Testament that when Moses spoke to God, his face began to glow. And so maybe Jesus is talking to God. But wait, there are two men there. The first is Moses. He's the deliverer of Israel, the man who talked to God, the man whose face shone with the fading glory of God. So maybe Jesus is not talking to God and getting the glow. The second figure is Elijah, fiery prophet who was a spokesman for God, and the man who was going to, rumored to usher in the last days, a man who would be present when God came to deliver his people again. And he's talking with Jesus. And then the cloud appears and covers Jesus. And that's a clear reminder of the presence of God. When Moses ascended Mount Sinai, and the mountains were enveloped in a cloud, and out of the cloud came the voice of God. And so God descends on the mountain, and God descends on Jesus, and there's a voice. And the voice says, "This is my beloved Son. Listen to him." The voice of God speaks, and so we listen. But the words also are a reminder to the disciples of the beginning, because they remind them of Jesus' baptism, when the Spirit descended and the voice of God spoke the exact same thing. "This is my beloved Son. Listen to him." And something inside them must have clicked. If they would stop looking at what they wished they were and look at who he is, they would see that their vision of Messiah, though beautiful and storybook, is really small in comparison. Their vision of marriage is all chocolate and roses, when real marriage is deep and abiding oneness. Their vision of being a parent is all about ball games and parties, when real parenting is about helping children grow up. Their vision of Messiah is ruling a nation, when the real Messiah is the Son of God himself, who reigns over a kingdom that's not made with hands. And that disillusionment that came with Jesus' call to deny has become the awe that comes with the substance of the reality of who Jesus Christ, the Son of the living God, really is. Remember when you were first a believer? You thought that if you just got right with God, everything would be okay. Life would go more smoothly. You'd be healthier, wealthier. Your decisions would get easier. You thought there'd be some magic switch that switched and turned everything around. But now, it's many years later, and you're looking at a life that's tough, and you have choices in front of you that there are no good choices there. And you're struggling with your faith because God is not who you expected him to be, and following Jesus is more difficult and, frankly, less rewarding than you imagined. Maybe you need to take some time and look back to remember what it was in the beginning that called you out of the darkness and into the light. And remember you need to remember what it was that you imagined it would be like. But you need to set those things aside and look at what you do have and see the way that God has guided your life, and see how even in the midst of trials that you're not alone. See how though not perfect, your life is very different because of your relationship with God. And maybe what you'll find is something far deeper than health and wealth and freedom from hell. Maybe what you'll find when you look at the reality of your faith is none other than Jesus. And maybe you'll see him transfigured before your eyes. Maybe you'll hear the voice of God. Maybe you'll find that the real faith that you have is greater than the faith you once imagined. It is, after all, the faith that you have.